future of jobs in India. And I mentioned that nearly 10 million new entrants to the job market will appear every year in India for the next 10 years at least, which means we need to create about 100 million jobs to employ these people. Otherwise, the consequences of unemployment will be very severe on various fronts in India. So we thought that we need to get some out-of-the-box ideas about how does one go about creating 100 million jobs in India in view of the fact that there are going to be a lot of job attritions happening because of various reasons and new job additions happening because of economic growth. In net effect, we have to create about 100 million jobs. So what are your overall views on this topic?
So firstly, I've always felt that, as others have, that the decade of 2010 to 2020, when India is expected to add about 130 million new jobs or million new people into the job market, would be a source of strength for us as compared to, let's say, China, which will see only an addition of 23 million people. China benefited from the earlier decade when they had 118 million people added to the workforce, and that workforce they absorbed very well and became the manufacturing base for the world. Now the tragedy now is that there is so much technological change that is going on all over the world, even in China and of course in the developed world, given the rise in wages in China and the developed world, that they have to bring down the cost structure for themselves, and therefore they are actually automating in such a large way. In every area, even the most labor-intensive area, I was told about this garments industry where there's so much attempt at automation, bringing robotic sewing into United States and Germany and so on, that they will not need the likes of Bangladesh and Vietnam and even India and China to convert their fabric into garments, because or they'll be able to reduce at a much lower cost and convert that fabric into garments, and therefore they'll have made in US, made in Europe garments, and that will drive much greater joblessness here. So what is the answer? I think in India, first and foremost, we will follow the same trend as in China. China has seen a dramatic surge over the last 30, 40 years in migration from rural jobs to urban-oriented jobs, and urbanization also. And the same thing is going on in India. We are already at over 30% urbanization. It will go up to over 50% in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years. So we have to create jobs in concentrated geographical locations, these smart city areas and existing urban towns. But there is an opportunity today in the rural areas in this transition period to dramatically create large volumes of jobs in agri-processing. So we are one of the largest agricultural produce countries in the world. Our total agricultural output would be over 600 million tons, almost the same as the United States. But we don't add as much value between the farm and the consumer as the Western world does, for good reason. I think it's we have the capacity to add value at home by chopping and cleaning your vegetables as compared to, for instance, the Western world. But if we can add value in saving costs by quick freezing, by first of all, harvesting in a timely manner, moving it from there to the consumer in a timely manner, faster time frame, we can create dramatic number of jobs, the sorting, grading, and so on. So we are seeing some of it happening now. You know, the rise in these wages in the rural areas, the MNREGA and other programs are forcing people to go more aggressively into mechanization of not only plowing and sowing, but also harvesting, whether it's rice or other products. And I think that is going at a much faster pace and will grow at a much faster pace. Now, technically, that will not take away jobs, they will add to the produce, so bring down hopefully cost structure. Now, if cost structure goes down, markets will enlarge because price elasticity of demand in India is very high. So saving in cost is also very important in this process, while you, of course, additionally create jobs. So the first stage in that is agriculture to farm, to plate, from farm to plate. there's a huge amount of job creation possible. Now, how does that job get created? It's not as if one investment by a government or something can lead to it. It has to be organic, spontaneous, as it were, creation of enterprises by locals who fit the need and build up that value. And so there has to be a recognition that we need skill base, we need the knowledge base to as to what processes are required. We'll also have to have the funding base. The markets in some ways exist. The marketing will have to change. The buyers will have to recognize that they don't have to buy raw vegetables and then sort them out in their warehouses and all. They'll get sorted warehouses and then they can be diced and chopped and changed and packaged and frozen and sent to faraway places. So the whole consumption pattern, the supply chain for agricultural produce will have to change. It can happen. Progress is being made in small areas, and especially in the commercial crops. You have seen that happen. It will happen more and more in the food grains and the pulses and the other vegetable produce, which is also a very big part. So that is one area which we have to think of how to create the ecosystem for more jobs to be created, more economic activity to take place between the farm and the ultimate consumer. In addition, I think we have not done enough on innovation. Now look at China. China spends about 2% of its GDP on research and development, 162 billion last year, and they employ tens of thousands of people in R&D alone. 30,000 PhDs are turned out in science and technology in China, only in science and technology. Now, we don't do enough of R&D. We are willing to be copycats. We can reverse engineer so well, for instance, in pharmaceuticals, in drugs, in pharmaceutical equipment, and so on. But we will need to make changes in the way we think. So, for instance, we have one of the largest producers of cotton. We have a superb and flourishing textile industry. But are we doing enough in terms of research on how that fabric is used by consumers? A pure cotton fabric gets crushed. It's not easy to maintain in the tropical climate, the humid climate that much of India has. It's not the most elegant to wear. Whereas the blended fabrics, the polyester and other blended fabrics, have their own disadvantages for the tropical climate, that they are hot, they don't have the same comfort levels and so on. So is there this possibility of creating better fabric, better improvement in technology to make greater comfort? Now, if we go into that, we will leapfrog from our existing level of demand to a different level of demand. We'll cater to world demand. Now, you have in synthetics, you have nylon 66, which is supposed to have better wick-like properties and better moisture absorption potential than, for instance, polyester, perhaps as good as cotton in some cases and so on. But we need to do ourselves that work and then integrate it with the whole current manufacturing base so that we can create new demand for our products, which will be less competitive with the world. It will have greater competitive advantage with the world, and then we can again become a supplier to the world market. So not disrupting our base, but tweaking it, improving our technologies to address existing markets that are already existing for us, and then improving the product quality. Likewise, I see this example in the United States. The space age industry, it was at one time only NASA and a few contractors, Boeing and Lockheed and so on. And today, what a flourishing private sector industry has emerged. And technological breakthroughs are leading to dramatic cost reduction. So, for instance, a Falcon 9 rocket can launch a 20-ton payload for $62 million, which NASA would have taken much more. And the ULA, the other program that NASA had encouraged, is still launching at $160 million, whereas these private sector guys do it as much as $100 million. And there are guys who are coming out with tailor-made solutions at a higher unit cost. So, for instance, there's an American company in New Zealand that's going to launch I think it's called the Firefly, a rocket, I forget the name of that rocket, but they're going to launch for $5 million because now satellites have become CubeSat size, 10 centimeters, 4 inches long. That is a standard satellite for communication. And so they can have multiple launches, but you don't need to have a $62 million launch cost. You can do it for $5 million because you will achieve your objective. So by addressing customized demand, what the customer needs, you are able to create a completely new product, change the nature and basis of competition, create new demand by addressing a different need. And I can see that happen, for instance, in our, of course, pharmaceutical industry. We have a very large pharmaceutical industry, 96,000 crores, as it were, in size, and huge production capacity, huge base. We are doing a lot of exports, but can we do a little more customization for the consumer? Of course, there are huge regulatory hurdles in this process. The US FDA and Indian FDA and other regulatory authorities have to approve those kinds of things. But there is an opportunity for customization of medicine and consequent changes in the back end. So the manufacturing will have to be flexible enough to change and tweak the molecule or the delivery system to address customer needs. We may have to develop a whole new industry which exists in a very modest way in India, the biotechnology industry and the gene-based therapies that we are working on. They're already, there's a lot of talent available in India, and there's a lot of Indian talent working in the Western world. But harnessing all that talent to perhaps address Indian markets as well as the world market. Perhaps Indian markets may not yet, for the time being, afford all those new remedies that maybe may come out with, but we may be able to do for the Western world those kinds of programs which address their needs at a more efficient cost. So I think these are outcomes of innovation. They will not come automatically. Just doing the same thing as we have been doing, or in a marginally better way by tweaking our processes, reducing costs or improving quality, that's not going to be enough. Yes, cost, quality, flexibility, safety of workers and more involvement of workers is a necessity. But at the end of the day, I think the drive towards creating jobs must come from the consumer. What the consumer needs today, we know. Everyone is trying to address that. What he needs tomorrow or she needs tomorrow, that's what we have to try and find out. Or create that need, which is what, for instance, the mobile phone did. Today, at least 54,000 jobs have been created in the mobile phone sector by manufacturing in India. We could have created this industry much earlier. We didn't have the ecosystem, but now we are creating that ecosystem for microelectronics manufacturer. We would have otherwise had $400 billion of imports by 2020 if we had continued the same rate as we were importing at 3 years ago. But by creating that industry, we will create a dramatic number of jobs because the consumer needs electronic goods. The consumer needs the iPad and the iPhone and the mobile devices that that person is now got so used to. And there'll be no devices coming up. If we do research and development and we find that we need a watch that tells you your heart rate and checks your sweat and tells you what's wrong with you instantly on a live basis, maybe there's a need, maybe there'll be additional demand created. There's already that kind of trend going on in the world. So innovation, but starting from the consumer end. What can address the consumer needs? Can we as a nation address those consumer needs? And I think that requires fundamental change in thinking at the educational level also. So our education system must of course teach basics, but also then commercial, the bridging from the technology to the consumer end, technology to the commercialization of technology. That end is a bit slack in our country. We need to stress that part at the schools and the colleges, that what can work from your knowledge base to address customer needs, and what will be the customer needs going in the future. Look at the way this taxi business has taken off in the West. Instead of hailing a cab, you sort of have this Uber and Lyft and so on. And 70 billion is the market cap of Uber. Why? Because it's not just aiming at simply replacing the taxi demand. They're going for the whole automobile industry, the 10 trillion automobile industry, saying we will revolutionize the automobile industry with self-driving cars which will be available on tap, which will take you to the last mile connectivity. So you don't need to have your own personal car. A complete change. The personal car is not used at night. You use it for a couple of hours during the day to drive yourself to work and back and so on. Why do you have to have such an investment in an automobile? Why not do it in a different way and have common assets which are shared across the country, but therefore cost is lower for everyone? And so this self-driving car can be a dramatic revolution in thinking, and likewise we will see other ways that, like Google is talking of flying car, God knows it may be a reality. But innovation addressed from the consumer needs, finding out what can serve the consumer best and what kind of products can serve the consumer best, and then working on developing those products. We may have to borrow technology, we may have to work in partnership with the Western world, we may have to work with leaders in the world, create the ecosystem to be able to do that. Let's not be insular, let's not have these barriers to flow of knowledge from other sides. You know, the Rig Veda said that let noble thoughts flow in from all sides. That's what we want. Let them come from any direction. Let's absorb them, transform them to suit our people's needs as well as the world's needs. That is the philosophy with which we'll have to address our markets and our resource base and human resource base in particular. Otherwise, we will have hardship for lots and millions of people, and that leads to all the ills of society, the economic ills, the Naxalite movement and the Maoist movement and so on are all from economic problems. If we can address those economic problems, we'll be much better off.